Robert Frank was one of the most influential photographers of the 20th century due to his free, poetic, subjective, and evocative photographic language, which departed from the classical norms that subordinated photography to a more pictorial, technical, and orderly style. In this regard, he was entirely opposed to salon photography as well as journalistic photography, as he avoided any moral or remedial lessons with his work. Frank, an existentialist artist, captured moods, atmospheres, and aimed for a different kind of beauty in his images. His first photo book, The Americans, a masterpiece of contemporary photography, marked a turning point in the 1960s with its approach to understanding photographs as individual verses of a larger poem that is the photo book. He sought realistic photos with a deeper intention of being truthful, but in a subjective manner, without directly or obviously pointing out the subject or theme in his photographs. Frank was a person mythicized during his lifetime, and there is a widespread consensus that he is the great photographic figure of the 20th century. He reinvented himself with each decade, developing very distinctive photographic processes. He had the charm of being a true member of the Beat generation, a genuine hippie, unpolished, anti-materialistic, and apart from all the media trappings of fame. This has contributed to the reverence that exists around his figure. Robert Frank was born on November 9, 1924, in Zurich. He was the child of a German father and a Swiss mother and grew up surrounded by wealth, as his family had a prosperous family business that he was expected to be a part of as he grew up. However, Robert had other plans, and as a way to distance himself from the pressure of his parents, he turned his attention to photography. Although he never formally studied photography, he had his first encounters with it in his hometown, guided by Hermann Segesser. This experience led him to practice taking portraits and landscape photographs, and it served him well in publishing his first book, 40 Photos, which featured shots taken between 1941 and 1946. In 1947, Robert Frank immigrated to the United States, where Alexei Brodovich hired him as a fashion photographer for Harper's Bazaar magazine. However, the bulk of his work was not in photographing models but rather in the streets. As a result, he began a series of trips to Europe and South America, which resulted in books such as Peru and Valencia in 1952. The year 1950 was one of the most significant in both his professional career and his personal life. On one hand, he married the painter Mary Lochspeiser, and on the other hand, he participated in the 51 American Photographers exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York with the support of Edward Steichen. After a few years of living in the United States, Frank's perspective on the country began to change. He moved away from optimism and started to see the country as a field of sadness and loneliness. For this reason, he spent some time in France, but ultimately returned in 1953 to work for Vogue, Fortune, and McCall's. In 1955, Robert Frank won a Guggenheim Fellowship and already had 2 children, Pablo and Andrea. Together with his wife, he took a Ford Coupe and embarked on a 9-month journey across the United States. With his camera and the perspective of an outsider, he aimed to capture the other side of the American dream, the injustices, sadness, racial and social disparities, in other words, the reality that few were documenting. In total, he took 28,000 photographs, but he selected only 83 for what would become his most renowned work, The Americans. The initial publication of the book was in France in 1957, and it arrived in the United States in 1958 with a prologue written by Jack Kerouac. However, The Americans did not receive immediate recognition. Its true value would be appreciated by the world in the 1960s when it was exhibited at the Art Institute of Chicago and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. What made this work so exceptional? It completely departed from the established norms, not only by presenting the opposite side of what was portrayed in cinema but also by incorporating dark, unfocused, blurry, and profoundly sad photographs, so sad that it was even accused of being anti-American. After publishing The Americans, he began to experiment with filmmaking, directing numerous documentaries and short films. Among these, his first standout work was Pull My Daisy, a film written by Kerouac and featuring the poet Allen Ginsberg. He also directed Keep Busy in Candy Mountain, sharing the directorial duties with Rudy Wurlitzer. However, his most famous documentary was Cocksucker Blues, which chronicled the tour of the same name undertaken by the Rolling Stones in the United States. Because the footage included very explicit scenes, the band members refused to allow it to be screened. In 1972, a series of autobiographical photographs marked Robert Frank's return. These photographs were part of Lines of My Hand. At the same time, his personal life had undergone a significant change, as he was now living in Nova Scotia with his new wife, the painter June Leaf. He had separated from his first wife in 1969. During this time, the photographer's primary focus was on documenting his family life. However, fate had something else in store for him. His son was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and his daughter tragically died in a plane crash in 1974. From that moment on, his work would shift more towards social themes, and be noticeably influenced by his family difficulties. In 1995, he established the Andrea Frank Foundation in honor of his daughter, providing financial support to artists. Over the years, Robert Frank's public life faded, and he became increasingly reluctant to make public appearances. Finally, on September 9, 2019, he passed away in a hospital in Nova Scotia at the age of 94. Robert Frank was a man who viewed the world through his lens with a unique perspective. His life was a journey through the very essence of human existence. As his images are revealed before us, we can catch a glimpse of the heart of an artist, a narrator of everyday life, an unwavering observer of the human condition. Robert Frank was born in Switzerland, but his restless spirit led him to travel the world with his camera in hand. It was in America where he found his muse, capturing the fleeting moments of life on the streets, the unfamiliar faces, and the untold stories. His most iconic work, The Americans, presents us with a raw and honest vision of the nation that embraced him as its own. In his photographs, Frank compels us to look beyond the surface, to question what we take for granted. His images are not just frozen snapshots in time, they are windows into the souls of those who inhabit his frame. Each photograph is a visual poem, a narrative of life as he lived it, with its joys, sorrows, and contradictions. But Robert Frank didn't just change the way we see the world through the lens, he also challenged the conventions of photography in his time. His compositions were often asymmetrical, his frames imperfect, but it was precisely in those imperfections where he found beauty and authenticity. His style influenced generations of photographers who sought to break free from the rigidity of traditional rules. Robert Frank's work is a reminder that photography is not just a visual representation of reality but a profound exploration of the human condition. His images challenge us to look beyond the surface, to question our own perceptions, and to find meaning in the seemingly mundane. In a world flooded with digital and ephemeral images, Robert Frank's work reminds us of the importance of authenticity, emotion, and human connection in photography. His photographs echo his own life, a testament to his personal journey, and an invitation to reflect on our own. In the 21st century, Robert Frank's legacy lives on in the work of countless photographers who continue to explore life through their cameras. His influence is undeniable, his mark indelible. He reminds us that photography is more than just a technique, it is a way of seeing and understanding the world. Robert Frank's work remains alive, inviting us to look beyond the image and explore the depths of the human experience. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. This way, you'll always stay up to date with all the videos I produce here. Until the next one. See you later.